All of the recently uploaded videos on my YouTube channel have been filmed with a $500 setup, and I would say they still look and sound pretty decent. In this video, I'll be breaking down not only the gear I use, but also how I get the most out of it. So first off is the camera I use, which is actually the Canon T3i, and I wouldn't say you have to use that, but just any DSLR from around the time of 2010-ish. You can find a DSLR from around that time for about $150. You just have to look on eBay or Facebook Marketplace or something like that, because you can find good deals for those. And a lot of times they actually come with like different lenses too and stuff like that. But before I go into different things about a camera, first I just wanted to say that there are some cons to getting a camera that old. And just one, for example, is that a lot of times they will either have bad autofocus or no autofocus at all. For example, the camera that I'm using right now doesn't have continual autofocus while recording. So I have to half press the shutter before it focuses and then record the video. And that can get really annoying when I'm like far away from the camera. I have to find different ways to focus on things near me and stuff like that. So that's definitely a challenge of having an older camera. But I'd say for the most part, cameras like the one I'm using right now are great for beginners. I do use a kit lens for filming my videos, but I would recommend switching to a prime lens or upgrading, because prime lenses can have a lower aperture usually, so that means you can let in more light and have a more blurry background. Now, in order to get the most out of an old camera, you have to know some settings. So right now, I'm just going to list a couple of basic rules that you should stick to as a beginner. First one is just keep your aperture low. 90% of the time, you're going to want to keep your aperture low. Also, next one is to keep your ISO low. You should always do that no matter what. If you can, keep your ISO lower. And the third one is your shutter speed should be double your frame rate. So if you're filming at 24 frames per second, shutter speed should be 1/50. If you're filming at 30 frames per second, shutter speed should be 1/60, and so on. So now that I'm done talking about my camera, I'm going to move on to the next part of my setup, which is actually lighting. So lighting is basically the number one thing that will take your videos from looking okay to looking amazing. I use a $50 key light off Amazon. It's called the Mount Dog Softbox Lighting Kit. It's just one light. It has a softbox and a remote. Really, any Amazon softbox light will do, but you have to make sure you get one with a remote so you can change things like color temperature and the brightness of the light. It's just a lot better for when you say want to keep your aperture really low and you need to change the brightness of the light so you're not overexposed or underexposed. So learning basic lighting techniques is really one of the most important things you can do in filmmaking. Just moving the light a little bit can affect the mood of your video a ton. The basic lighting technique I use in all my videos and a lot of other people use is called Rembrandt lighting. It's where the light is to the side of you and a little bit up like I have it right now, and it creates this like upside down triangle on this side of my face. So a lot of people think that looks good, and I think it looks pretty good too. The reason why it's so popular, I think, is just because it's so simple yet effective. Now, when you do use Rembrandt lighting, there is going to be this shadow on your face, which you can get rid of by either using a different light or just natural light like a window. Right now, I'm not going to fix that because I don't have a window next to me, but that's something you could change if you wanted to. And after all, you can get creative and use whatever lighting techniques you want with whatever light you get. Here's an example of what I was saying earlier about how lighting affects mood. If you have the light at a really high angle or just directly above your head, it's going to give the video kind of a creepy feel because no one's going to be able to see your eyes. It's just going to be dark circles. And if you have the light really low, it's also going to give a creepy feel. Almost like when you were a little kid and you would do that with a flashlight to tell creepy stories. It's the same thing in making videos. Now, of course, you don't have to be super dramatic with either of these if you want to have the light higher or lower, because then it'd be obvious what you were doing. But if you just want to have the light subtly lower or higher, just to add a different feel to the video, that'd be perfectly fine. And really, after all, it is up to you, whatever you want to do. Now, my last tip with lighting is actually to film on the shadow side of your subject. So if your camera is on one side of your subject, you want the light to be on the other side. Not necessarily directly on the other side, but kind of at an angle. Here's an example of what something looks like when you're filming on the side with the light, and then when you're filming on the shadow side. The one after obviously looks better. Now, of course, there are some exceptions to this rule, but right now I'm just trying to give you the basic information you need to get started with a cheap setup like this. And of course, the camera setting tips I was giving and shooting on the shadow side are things you do no matter how expensive your gear is. Now moving on to the next thing on this list, which is actually how I capture audio, which is this microphone right here. It's $30. This is the Takstar SGC600. I've talked about it a lot on this channel, and I've also made a review of it. You don't necessarily have to get this microphone, but I've seen videos of people comparing it to expensive Rode microphones. I've used it myself, and I can definitely guarantee you that it is great for the price. Probably the best you're going to get for a shotgun microphone on the market. Here are just 2 tips to get the best audio out of this microphone. The first one is actually to turn the audio levels on your camera down, and to compensate for that by using the audio controls on the microphone itself. The reason why that works is just because whatever system inside your camera for turning up the audio levels is just a lot worse quality and will introduce a lot more background noise. So just make sure to do that. And the second step is actually to bring the microphone closer to your mouth. It just makes it sound a lot better than if it were far away, and that is how shotgun microphones were designed to work. In the future, if you wanted to, you could also have the microphone on a boom arm above you, which is what a lot of people do. But for now, you could just hold it. And actually, I would recommend getting a 10-foot long cord for that, or really any length, but I'm going to link one in the description. It's only about $10 extra. So that brings the whole audio category to $40. Now I'm going to talk about what I use to hold my camera up, which is this Neewer tripod, and it is about $130. I don't know exactly what model of tripod this is, but I will put the link to it in the description of this video, along with all the other gear I mentioned in this video. Now, I know you're probably surprised that my tripod is basically as expensive as my camera, but there's no need to buy my exact tripod. You can really buy whatever tripod you want. Just if you can afford it, don't buy one of those $20 Amazon ones. It's just really dangerous to have your camera on. Especially if you upgrade your camera in the future, you do not want to be dropping that. So that's it for my gear, but I do need a video editor to edit on, and the one I use is DaVinci Resolve, and it's free. I'm not going to be talking about that at all because that's just an extra side thing. I just want to mention that's the one I use. You could also use CapCut if you want, because CapCut's also great with all the basic features. Now, if you were counting, or if I put a counter up in the edit of how much money this all came out to, you'd notice that it did come out to under $500. So if you were just happy with that, then that's great, but if you wanted to stick to the $500 budget, you could actually upgrade one of the things in this list, like maybe get a camera that's a little bit newer. But after all, it is up to you. These are just recommendations I would give for how to get the most out of a cheap camera setup. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.